When F1 fans think about accidents in Formula One, they generally think of Niki Lauda or Ayrton Senna in 1994 at the San Marino Grand Prix. But at that exact race where Ayrton Senna died, there is a death that has been very much overlooked and forgotten by Formula One. And that was the death that took place the day before Senna's of Roland Ratzenberger in what is still to this day the biggest recorded crash in Formula One, and an event that unfortunately for Ratzenberger has been very much overshadowed.
20 minutes into the 1 hour session, the very popular Austrian driver Roland Ratzenberger unaccountably went off the circuit at some 190 miles an hour, and we have just had the very sad news that he has succumbed to his injuries. This confirms the fact that nobody had any doubt of that Grand Prix racing is a dangerous sport.
Roland Ratzenberger began his career in the 1980s, driving in Formula Ford, Formula 3000, and then also in various sports car championships, including the British Touring Car Championship and in Japanese series. And he even finished third in his class at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1993. But after seeing drivers he competed against in Formula 3000 like Eddie Irvine make their way to Formula One and him still not getting there, that had always been his dream. And he almost got a drive with the Jordan F1 team in 1991 in their first season, but it was very much reliant on his sponsorship, which unfortunately fell through at the last minute. But he would gain a large sponsor in an heiress who wanted him to join the Simtek team for 1994, and she pushed her way into getting him into that seat for the season, for their first season in Formula One. And I'm not going to cover the Simtek story, which is in itself incredibly interesting because Wimbo has already covered it incredibly well up here, so be sure to check that out afterwards. But this meant that Roland, thanks to this sponsorship, finally got his shot in Formula One. The German heiress paid for him to have 5 races to show what he could do at Simtek, and he was lined up alongside David Brabham. Unfortunately, it didn't get off to a great start, and at Interlagos that year he failed to qualify. However, at the next race in Japan, he not only managed to qualify for the race, but managed to drag a car that had no rights to be there to 11th place, showing that the 33-year-old Formula One debutant did have the skill to really wrangle a car to where it needed to be, and given more time, he really could be a star of the sport. And then they went to Imola, his third race of his debut season in Formula One at the San Marino Grand Prix. Friday's qualifying that weekend was overshadowed by an incredible crash for Rubens Barrichello. Rubens Barrichello's enormous crash would have been enough for any sane person to step back and think to themselves, perhaps I shouldn't race this weekend. But Formula One drivers are not a sane breed, and they pushed on into Saturday's qualifying. Luckily, Rubens Barrichello walked away without any serious long-lasting injuries. And for Ratzenberger, there was already signs of trouble on that Friday aside from the Barrichello crash. He was having issues with his brakes and thought that perhaps it was something he was doing wrong, so he asked the much more experienced David Brabham to take a run in his chassis. And Brabham came back to the same conclusion as him, that something needed to be done to the brakes, but after that was tuned, both drivers were happy that the issue had been fixed, and they were ready to go qualifying on Saturday. As qualifying kicked off on Saturday, Ratzenberger had an off at Aqua Minerale and damaged his front wing slightly. But given that the German heiress who had funded already half of his 5-race run was sitting in the crowd watching this weekend unfold, he didn't want to make too much of a fuss about this and quickly checked over the front wing. Seeing no visible signs that there was any issues, he pushed on, intent on getting himself into the best possible location for that weekend's Grand Prix. So he pushed on for another lap, but unbeknownst to Ratzenberger, the The front wing was more damaged than initially considered, and as he went through the highest downforce corner on the track, the Villeneuve corner, the front wing became dislodged and went under the wheel of his car, losing complete control and sending him into the wall at 195 miles per hour. The G-force of the crash was measured at 500 G, the largest ever recorded in the history of Formula One.
Chicane on the TV, and they carry a lot of speed. Oh. And Ratzenberger's had a heavy shunt indeed. We're going just to see there's movement in the cockpit, but that is a heavy impact on the left-hand side. And he's gone off onto the left-hand side of the track. That is flat out, 190 miles an hour. Red flag once again all around the circuit.
Ratzenberger was rushed by ambulance to a helicopter and sent to a medical centre in Bologna, but unfortunately he was pronounced dead on arrival. Bernie Ecclestone personally delivered the news to the Simtek racing team, a massive blow to any team, let alone one trying to get through its first season in Formula One. Teammate David Brabham thought long and hard about racing on Sunday after this, as any normal human would, but decided it was the best thing to do for the team and in the memory of Roland. And Ayrton Senna, who was deeply affected by this death, was asked not to race the next day by Sid Watkins, but he famously said, "I cannot quit. I have to go on." And we all know exactly how that ended. Given Ayrton Senna's legend in Formula One compared to Ratzenberger, who had just gotten into the sport, died the very next day, the Roland Ratzenberger crash is often overlooked in Formula One history. But that doesn't make it any less important. And between the Senna crash and the Ratzenberger crash, both of their marks on the sport can be felt today. Without Ratzenberger's crash, it's likely that the hands device that has helped save so many lives in Formula One wouldn't have been created. And between both of them and the Rubens Barrichello crash that weekend, a mountain of safety implementations have come into play. So while his death may be overshadowed, it certainly isn't in vain. And while he died certainly too early at the age of 33, at the very least, he died doing what he had dreamed of his entire life, racing in Formula One.
It now requires the drivers who have qualified for tomorrow's event to examine themselves and decide what they want to do about it. It is a tragic start to the European Grand Prix season.